I was actually going to add that that was one of the reasons that you went, was because I kept saying, you're not listening to me.
And she thought it was my hearing. Yeah.
See what I got to live with? My name is Carol Weisheit. I am currently a regional manager for Birth to 5, Illinois. And how I ended up in Bloomington was I married this guy and we moved from the state of Washington.
And I ended up here with a job at Illinois State University, where I've been now for, this will soon be 42 years. We came here not necessarily expecting to stay, but it's turned out to be a lovely community, and we're just happy to be here. Well, we came in 1982. So we're talking 41 years. This will be 42 years this year. I was an only child, which meant I was used to a quiet household. So even to this day, noisy, ruckus areas wear me out very quickly. But also when I was very young, when I'm guessing about 3, maybe 2.5, I had surgery in my left ear, which really damaged my ability to do good hearing out of that ear. Which eventually led me to, later in my life, seek out hearing aids.
I grew up in a family of 6, and there was lots of noise. Marching band was a big one, so I had that. Otherwise, just regular concerts as I was growing up that I would go to that might have impacted my hearing.
We're also old enough that when we were going at that time in history, no one thought much about protecting your hearing.
That is true.
Even today, you'll find many musicians where hearing plugs while they're listening to, the band that's going to come on after them. Mm-hmm. That was never true when I was going to concerts.
Yeah. I'm in early childhood, so I am particularly attuned to noises that young children are hearing. So I cringe a lot when children are at music venues without any hearing protections.
In the distant past now we're talking, but I remember going to an Alice Cooper concert where people went and sat inside of some of the speakers that were down on the floor in front of the stage, which just now would seem insane. Well, I noticed it from early on because of the surgery. My other ear was in pretty good shape, but it wasn't until I got a bit older, in fact, older meaning probably in my 50s, that even my other ear was starting to lose a little bit of its clarity. Like a lot of people, I put it off for a long time. I did go to one place and tried getting some hearing aids, and quite frankly, they were uncomfortable and they didn't work that well. So I just sort of put them in a shelf and delayed. There is one incident that I've never told Carol, but I think she might find interesting. I went to another place to have my hearing tested, and I come out of the room, and a colleague of mine in another department is sitting there. And he says, "What are you here for?" Well, there was a woman sitting there reading a newspaper and holding it up in front of her. And I said, "Oh, my wife thinks I have trouble hearing her." And the woman just burst into laughter. And she said, "I'm so sorry for eavesdropping, but I couldn't help but hear that."
I was actually going to add that that was one of the reasons that you went, was because I kept saying, you're not listening to me.
And she thought it was my hearing. Yeah.
See what I got to live with?
And, maybe one of the secrets to our long marriage is that we both have trouble hearing. Someone sitting on my left side, which is my bad ear, would be talking to me, and I would have to keep turning my head to hear them. It was annoying, but it seemed natural. I mean, it was that way since I was a little kid, so it didn't seem, out of the realm of what's normal to me. It clearly wasn't normal, but it didn't feel abnormal.
I think it was when my charming spouse said, "You've got the TV up too loud." And I thought, this isn't right. He's the one with the hearing problem, not me. So eventually I caved and had gone to another practice, had gotten hearing aids, but it turned out that wasn't such a good fit, if you will.
Well, for me, I think it was really problematic when I would be in crowded restaurants or in large gatherings of people where everyone's talking, parties kind of things, because it became difficult to filter out who was saying what, and I was missing out on a lot of important conversations.
Since I'm an extrovert, I really didn't avoid places. I just felt like I was missing out when I was someplace. In my past life work, I was a trainer, and I went to a lot of conferences, or I would do training. And I found if I was attending a conference, it was really hard to hear the details, especially when I was in a big room and the speaker decided, oh, I didn't want to use a microphone. They can just hear me. And that was really difficult. And I would always write on the evaluations, you don't know who's got a hearing difficulty in this audience. Please use a microphone. But when I was training, it was difficult because I was always finding myself going, could you repeat that, please? And finally, it just got to be too much. But that was I remember that being a really frustrating part of my work life, not to mention the home life, but.
I should mention that our personalities are very different in that Carol is very social. She's an extrovert. I'm very much an introvert. The parties not being able to hear was just part of a general pattern of being uncomfortable in crowded groups where I was expected to socialize. I could certainly do it, but it wasn't something that felt natural to me. Yeah, I teach a large class, sometimes as large as 300 students. And there were times when it was hard for me to hear questions from the students. And that was a really important factor in my deciding, well, I really need to do something about this. Again, for me, yes, no doubt I delayed. And I do think until it got to the point that it became a bit of an issue with my students, then felt some pressure. But quite frankly, there was a very pragmatic factor here. Suddenly, the university decided to cover a big part of it with insurance. And so it became affordable. And that mattered a lot.
For me, I guess it was so gradual that I didn't realize what kind of impact it was having on my life. So when I finally decided to go, I did think a lot. Why do people wait? We don't wait when we can't see. We get glasses. So why don't you get a hearing aid? Because you miss out on so much. Birds singing, hearing our cats meow, and, all the other environmental things that you are really missing out on. For that reason, I think that I just wish people would really think about doing it. So I think in the past, why people waited a lot was that if you had shorter hair, they would stick out. If you have longer hair, you can kind of cover them up. But they've come so far in technology that I often, when somebody finds out I have hearing aids, they go, oh, you do? I was like, yeah. And then I whip my hair back and, show them what it looks like. But I think part of that stigma has just continued. But there shouldn't be a reason why people avoid it, just because of the technology and what the advances have been. And
I think there's the other factor that for a long time it was considered something that, that just affects old people. And the reality is, I think as you're finding more and more younger people with too much noise that is damaging their hearing, this time from headphones and in-ear devices, I think it's going to become less of a stigma and less of something that, that's just for old people. It'll be more like glasses. And quite frankly, I think the hearing aids are technically much better. I mean, the early ones were just awful, quite frankly. And they just weren't worth the money you would pay for them. And people would, get hearing aids and then not wear them. The newer ones are just such a leap forward in terms of quality and comfort.
Well, I think that happened with you because you had a bad fit, your first experience at a different practice. And with BNA, it was, they did a fit for him that just works great. Yeah. He just has to remember to put them in every day.
That's my big weakness. Yeah. I leave the house having forgotten to put them in.
Yeah.
And then I decide as I've left the house, is it worth going back? And the question is, how many people am I going to interact with today? If it's a lot, I'll go back and put them in. If it's not, then, I'll do without and just, strain to hear them.
And for me, it's the first thing I do as I'm getting dressed in the morning is to put my hearing aids in, because then I can start hearing the environment and hearing the day.
And hearing me.
Well, yeah, that too. I think a turning point for me was probably the TV and probably the harassment I got from, said spouse, which again, I think is funny because he's the one that experienced hearing loss most of his life. So I think maybe that was a turning point in not having that up so loud.
I think there was also an incident, I don't know if you remember this, we had a young lady who lived a couple of houses up from us who stayed overnight with us because her parents were gone. And we have a house that has a third floor that's an attic that's been finished out. And she went up and that was where she was going to be sleeping. Well, she could hear our TV from up on the third floor.
I totally forgot about that.
Yeah. And that was kind of like, well, maybe it is kind of loud.
Yeah. Well, maybe.
I don't think there was such a moment for me. It actually, quite frankly, had more to do with seeing ads for Bloomington-Normal Audiology and thinking, well, maybe I should give them a try. I hadn't been thrilled before with, the help I'd gotten from hearing aids, but quite frankly, it mattered to me that we're talking about a practice where the owners are also the doctors. And so it wasn't just a staff person who might have been trained a bit. These are people who know what they're doing. And that really mattered a lot to me.
So I wanted to go to BNA for some of the same reasons that Ralph had mentioned, and that is that we really appreciate that it was locally owned. To me, that's important to really focus on local. Also, just their reputation that they had. And also, for me, having an all-female practice was kind of intriguing to me, which is unusual, I think. No, I'm not sure what I expected before I went in. The experience I've had with hearing tests has always been like back to your school days. Raise your finger if you hear the beep. So I was not fully prepared for how extensive this is and how thorough it was, which I totally appreciated. So it made the process go a lot easier, I think, for me, because they knew what they were doing and how thorough they were going to be and different aspects of your hearing that they were going to investigate to make sure that, you got the best fit that you could get.
For that first appointment, I don't think going in, I knew quite what to expect. And my experience in previous efforts with other groups was not great. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. I don't think my expectations were sky high, but once I got in, I was pleasantly surprised. It was better than I was expecting. And as Carol says, it was more thorough. It was, I left feeling really good about the process and how it went, and not knowing what would happen when I got the actual hearing aids, but feeling good at that point, at least. I was happy to have gone.
I think for my first experience, it was just how welcoming and friendly all the staff were, from the time that you checked in till the time you went back. Explanation of what was going to happen, which was very comforting to me, that you knew exactly what was going to happen. There were no surprises. There were no questions about what was going to happen because it was so well explained, as we went through the process. Well, my concern from my previous experience with another group was that I didn't know how much I was missing. And that was one of the conversations I had about, different maybe speech parts that I wasn't hearing with much clarity. So we had a long discussion, I remember, about that, and her asking very pointed questions about specific speech parts, which made me feel really comfortable because that had not happened in the past. So I knew I was in good hands because of the expertise.
That first time going in for the testing was a surprise in the sense that I thought, I'll be in for a few minutes and we'll be done, because that was my previous experience with other providers, and it was much longer in a comforting way. It meant to me that they knew exactly what they were doing, that they were basically looking at every hearing range, every angle that might be relevant, and it turned out to be true, that it was well worth that time.
Totally in agreement on that one. It was, that kind of blew me out of the water. Boy, what I remember at the moment that I had my hearing aids in was just the clarity, and some of the background noises that I had been hearing before were gone. Because I also have tinnitus or tinnitus, however people pronounce it. So the hearing aid kind of masks some of that. So I was very, very surprised about that. and excited because then I thought, oh, good, I can spend my time thinking about other things and not this noise that's going on in my head. Yeah, I was just elated, after putting them in the first time.
I had an earlier experience with hearing aids many years earlier, maybe a decade earlier. And when those first were put in my ears, my brain just wasn't knowing how to react. I got all kinds of fuzzy, buzzy kind of noises and they said, oh, that'll settle down, you'll get used to it. With these, there was no sense that, oh, suddenly I've got this loud noise. It kind of gently came in. And by the way, the thing that made me actually really happy to have them, aside from being able to hear my charming spouse, because I had pretty serious hearing loss in my left ear, things like headphones with stereo were not really very helpful because that channel just wasn't coming through. But now I could hear the music on my phone through the hearing aids, and that left ear was pumped up enough that I now had true stereo sound, and it was amazing. It was such a delight. And that was big because we went through some of those things when we first put the hearing aids in. They were showing me the different features, and I said, and one of them was you can play the music, and I have something like 5,000 songs on my phone or something outrageous. And wow, that was just like, man, now I'm really sorry I didn't do this sooner because I could have been hearing this kind of music long ago. Yeah.
I think the adjustment period of having hearing aids for me was more around putting them in and then putting the glasses on, and you feel that extra little piece back there. But the comfort level was there from the start. That didn't affect me at all. I just have to remember to take them out when I'm going into the shower or, going to an aerobic or a water aerobics class to make sure that they're out so I don't damage them.
I forget to put them in. She forgets to take them out.
That's true. We're yin and yang. Yes. So I do sometimes forget. And in fact, I went to bed a couple of times thinking, why is everything so loud? And then I remembered, oh, I didn't take my hearing aids out. So I got to go take them out. So for me, there was a comfort level. It felt like pretty much from the get-go.
I really don't think there was an adjustment period. Again, this ability to hear things in stereo was huge. I love the fact that when my phone rings, it rings through my hearing aids and not through the phone. So really, I can't say there was any real adjustment. I mean, as I said, maybe the biggest adjustment is that forgetting to put them in, which again may say something about how comfortable they are because I leave the house and I'm in the car driving and I look down, oh, gee, that volume number is up kind of high. I bet I forgot to put my hearing aids in. So I put my hand up. Yeah, sure enough, I forgot, But no adjustment in the sense of anything uncomfortable or anything that made me, hesitate to use them. In fact, quite the opposite. I'm happy to use them.
Well, I think some of the sounds that I heard that were kind of new, one where I mentioned was birds singing outside. That was a great environmental sound that I didn't realize I had been losing all those years. But the ice maker on the refrigerator, when the ice cubes drop, it was like, I'd never heard that before. It's like, what's that noise? And then that's the drop of the ice cubes. Well, the bells and whistles that I like came a little later than Ralph's. He was the one that was using the phone feature. And so I started using it more recently, and I'm getting used to it. I like that. That's the one that I like. The other thing I like is having the mobile app so that when we go to concerts, say here in town, or anywhere for that matter, you can turn them down. You don't have to take them out. You can just turn down the volume, and they have different settings. So if it's got live music, it's got outdoor settings, whether or not you want the sound to come from the front, the back, or all around. And so those features are really kind of fun to mess around with to find out what works best for you.
In terms of features that I really like, I do like the feature that allows you to adjust the direction that the sound is coming from. Mm-hmm. And I notice that in particular in busy restaurants where I can turn off the people behind me so that I can hear the people in front of me. And usually it's my spouse. But that's a great feature. That really is helpful in just being able to have a good conversation with somebody.
I think for me, life is different because I feel like I'm engaged in a way that maybe I wasn't before. being able to hear everything when I'm at, say, a social setting at a neighbor's house or something, and you don't have those feelings of being left out. I think that's really important, especially as you age, because, some people tend to become more isolated. And I think with the hearing, you want to be engaged. So for me, it's mostly a social aspect.
I would say one of the things that I've noticed is that I do tend to forget to put them in. And what happens is if I go somewhere where I'm having a conversation with people who aren't speaking very loudly, I'm sitting there thinking, oh, I wish I'd put them in. This is, and it makes me appreciate what I get from them when I do use them, which I do pretty much every day. It's not that typically I forget them and then come back and put them in. So I use them pretty much every day. But on those occasions where I don't go back and put them in because I'm running late, I got to meet with these people, I sit there just thinking, this was a bad idea to not go back and get those hearing aids, because they really facilitate social interaction.
I think for me, my advice to people is to not wait. And I do wish someone had said to me, well, you didn't wait to get glasses, did you? I think that would have made a pretty big impact. So it's the old adage, run, don't walk, and get your hearing checked, because it just makes life so much brighter.
Yeah, I think the advice would be to at least get your hearing checked. There's no harm in that. It's like having your eyes checked. Mm-hmm. And maybe it turns out you really don't need hearing aids, but it would be nice to know. And maybe there's a reason why you keep asking people to repeat things, because you didn't hear it.
Or have your TV up too loud.
Up too loud, yeah. I would say that I'm hearing better, but not always listening better.
Ding, 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 ding. I think that is true. That is true. Because I found myself saying just the other day, do you have your hearing aids in? Did you hear that? Yeah, that's usually the first thing. And then if he's like, no, I got him in. And I go, okay, then you were ignoring me.
I think it's really made an improvement in my ability to interact with other people. And I would say it's two things. Number one, the quality of care that they provide. But quite frankly, it's also the technological advances that have just made hearing aids things that we couldn't have imagined years ago. I mean, they don't just amplify everything. They amplify those areas that you're lacking in. And that makes a huge difference in terms of comfort. And the team at Bloomington-Normal Audiology knows how to set things up to do just that.
I think for me, the professionalism of the practice means a lot to me. I mean, I think about professionalism a lot just because of the field that I'm in. And I think that, along with the expertise that they have and just the caring that goes on, your notices that, it's time, to get a check, we need to check in with you, just goes a long way. And I think in this day and age with that customer service, it's really, really important, so that you're not just somebody who comes in through a revolving door, but somebody that they really, really want to be successful in terms of, their hearing and engaging back with the world. And I think that's what this whole thing is about, is to make sure that you're not becoming isolated as you age, because that's a huge, huge issue, I think, in our society.